So everybody's being tight-lipped about the inevitable, and that's why we bring in our Hornets analyst, Joe Gerrity of Hornets 24/7. Thank you so much for coming in.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
It's good to have you here. Now, when it was announced, your thoughts on the fact that the Hornets actually have the #1 pick in the draft?
Well, first I slapped myself in the face a few times to make sure I wasn't dreaming. But really, I mean, it's just so exciting. It's so great to watch the transformation of the team over the last couple of years, and to finally have this happen, it just feels almost surreal.
Yeah, and Anthony Davis, everybody raves about him. We saw him here at the Final Four with Kentucky. You know, great body of work, although a short body of work. Tell me about the learning curve for this kid as he comes into the league.
Well, you know, he had that huge growth spurt just a couple of years ago where he put on whatever it was, 8 inches in a few months, or in a year or whatever it was.
Right.
And so he obviously, you know, is going to struggle with kind of learning his body, and especially as he has to put on weight and play against bigger and stronger NBA players. But coming off the bat, he should be he should make a huge impact on the defensive end, and that's really why the Hornets are going to draft, and that's where his impact is most going to be felt. On offense, he's going to get those easy buckets. He's going to get those highlight plays above the rim, and he's going to, you know, get the trash buckets that a lot of people take for granted, and that alone will be enough to make him a pretty solid NBA player right away, even on the offensive end. And as he gets older and older and he starts to develop more of a back-to-the-basket game, I think he could wind up being a very special talent.
And of course, Monty Williams loves to coach defense. That great wingspan, 7 feet 6 inches, 5 block shots per game as a freshman at Kentucky. His defensive skills were already there, aren't they?
What was most impressive about the 5 blocks a game is that he did it while picking up only 2 fouls. I mean, 2.5 blocks per foul is unheard of.
Yeah.
Honestly, I mean, it's just, you don't see that kind of stuff. He's a very special player on the defensive end, and I think that Monty is well aware of the potential that he possesses.
All right, so the Hornets have the #1 pick, but they also have the #10 pick coming up. How important is that, and what can the Hornets do with that?
It's very important. I think we're going to find out right away whether or not they're going to start taking risks on players, or whether or not they're going to take somebody who's going to be a steady performer. Someone like a Perry Jones, for example, is a risk. He could wind up being another star to put next to Anthony Davis for the foreseeable future. He's a physical freak, but he doesn't have a true position. He's an enigma of sorts in that he played power forward center in college, but a lot of NBA scouts see him as more of a 3. If he can get his shot going and he can develop a back-to-the-basket game and get his motor at 100%, he could be a great pickup if he falls that far. But on the other end, he could be a total bust that we wind up paying millions of dollars a year to sit on the bench and mope around.
Yeah. Now, which brings up the next question: are the Hornets possibly thinking about trading that pick and getting some value elsewhere?
I would think so, but I imagine it depends how the beginning of the draft plays out. If they find 3 or 4 guys that they like, and none of those guys are available, I think they'd have to consider trading the pick rather than take somebody who they don't love. At the same time, there are going to be a lot of good players available at 10 who will probably help them going forward, or would be able to help right away. Someone like an Austin Rivers, for example, would be a great 6th man, I think, eventually in the league, and he would provide that scoring punch that the Hornets have lacked in recent years.
Free agency, of course, gets underway next month, and that begs the question about Eric Gordon as a restricted free agent. What's going to happen there?
It's funny. I don't think he's quite as essential as a lot of people would think. With Anthony Davis, you have a face of the franchise. You have someone to put on billboards, to put on the front of calendars, and on video games, and you have a player that people are going to associate with the team. Eric Gordon, to some extent, became expendable then. I'm not saying he's not a great player, he's not a great scorer and an even better defender, but whether or not you want to tie, say, $13 million a year up for the next 4 years to keep a guy who has struggled to stay on the court is a decision that shouldn't be taken lightly.
Well, let's say you don't go with Gordon if you're the Hornets. Then what do? Do you bring somebody in, and who's out there on the market that you think might be available?
I think that this year especially, we have to just be patient. You can't go out trying to win a championship this year or next year. Davis is a project. He's not going to be at his peak for a number of years. And I think that if you go slowly, as opposed to what they did with Chris Paul, which was overpay guys who didn't really want to be here to come over here, and like Peja, for example. You want to avoid making that mistake so you don't tie up your cap room. So when a big player does become available, you have the means to go out and get him.
Ryan Blake, Marty Blake's son, great NBA scout. Marty was the best in the business. He said that Anthony Davis is a once-in-a-lifetime player, once-in-a-generation player. Do you agree with that?
I do. I didn't watch that much college basketball this year. What I saw from him was incredibly impressive on the defensive end. The fact that he was able to play so poorly on offense in the championship game and still dominate to some extent tells you a lot about his game. And I think if his offensive game can develop like a lot of people think it can, he could wind up being one of the best two-way players that we've seen.
Well, let's not be printing up the T-shirts, as you said already, for the championship. But what are your predictions for the Hornets as they move into this next season? And let's take it over the next couple of seasons.
It really depends what they do in the draft and what they do with Eric Gordon. But if they do keep Gordon, I think he and Davis make this a playoff team right away. I don't think you're going to win a series unless you go out and try to win right away, which would be, as I said, a foolish move. But you could be the 7th seed or the 8th seed if people stay healthy. Realistically, I'd say we're 3 years away from really being even to possibly contend. It just takes time for players to develop, and it's going to take time for us to build a team from the ground up, which is what Monty wants to do and Dell wants to do, as opposed to just going out trying to buy a team like the Knicks, which has obviously been unsuccessful.
Yeah, that hasn't worked out very well. All right, Joe Gerrity, one of the best in the business. Where can folks read your stuff?
Oh, Hornets247.com, part of the ESPN True Hoop Network, and then I also own HornetsReport.com, which is the biggest Hornets forum in the city.
All right, outstanding. We look forward to having you back as we move forward with the new age of the New Orleans Hornets. Thank you so much for stopping by.
Thank you.
We appreciate that.